Well, hello, 50s. How you doing? Uh, this probably looks like an ordinary apron, but it's really a cape that I'm wearing because I'm going to swoop in and rescue you on your paper. This is on your, quote, happiness paper. So I understand some of you have been having a little difficulty with that. We want to break out and we want to be able to do that really well. First, it's not due until the end of the semester. Last couple of weeks will be our last paper that we'll turn in. We do have other papers in between, but since it's the most demanding, we're working on it now. Two, you will have an entire spec sheet on it, including all the expectations, due dates, and everything. But for now, we simply want to get started, and we want to get started well. So I have some ideas for you. First of all, I gave you a template. I mean, that is training wheels. It's time to put that aside. You can use a few words maybe here and there, or a concept if you like from that, but that's not you. That's just was to get you started. And so I'm going to just prioritize this. First of all, and if you can't see all this, it doesn't matter because I'm going to be saying it, and I put it up there to keep me on track. First of all, you have to do the work. You have to do the work. You know what? I've got a few wonderful former scholars. I gotta say former because they're not doing the job right now. They're not kicking in for one reason or another, and they're just not doing the work, and it's starting to show. The cracks are showing. That's not good. We're gonna have to motivate ourselves. We're gonna have to pump ourselves up. You have to read this. You have to study it, and you may not even love it, but you still need to do it. Mark it up, highlight, get to the key points, understand it. You don't have to agree with it, understand it. So that's number one because this is your number one reference point for writing this paper. And you're going to be making numerous references to it, paraphrases, quotes, and so on. But it's your point that you make. All right. So really, one of the major premises of this book, and I'm not going to just go into detail about there's a great deal of information, but one of the major premises is just this, and I find it fascinating, and it's not new. It's anything but new, but I find it fascinating, and I hope you do too. It's this, that through our conscious mind, through our powers of concentration, through our self-discipline, in relation to our conscious mind, we can have peak experiences. Moments of, dare we say, ecstasy, when we feel like all cylinders are firing and we're at our best. We are capable of overcoming all kinds of obstacles, hardships, self-doubt, and it's the ballerina that does the perfect pirouette. It's it's Baumgartner, the pitcher, who comes in and pitches, what, 5 innings, and saves the World Series, in effect, for the Giants. He is using an incredible power of concentration, as are many of the athletes, the performers. And hey, why not us? Why not us? Why couldn't we? So that's the deal. No, we can't control what's going to happen to us. We cannot control external forces. We can control how we react to those. Now, that is easier said than done, isn't it? But if you seize on that, I have some ideas for you here that I want to share with you in terms of directions you could take in this paper. First of all, we talk about intros and options, introductions, ways you can introduce a paper. Let's get into some options first, one of which I already gave you. You can go ahead and seize upon the idea that happiness may seem to be a simple concept, but it is, by virtue of our understanding of this book and our own experience, quite complex. And it is multi-sided. If you want to defend that, fine. If you don't, throw it out, do something else. I have another idea for you. This just came to me a few days ago, so I want to share it with you. What if you used a premise like this, that is, that we have the self-discipline that helps us control our conscious action, our conscious thinking to a degree, and that we can channel it in a very powerful way to the point where we are able to be undisturbed by all sorts of extraneous distractions that fragment our consciousness. If you really wanted to zero in on doing that perfect painting, you really wanted to zero in on doing that perfect essay, or that perfect lecture. No, I'm not giving a perfect lecture. But if you really wanted to zero in on doing what you wanted to do without being pulled away, without having your distraction concentration disturbed, then what if you used this essay for your own gain? That is, you used yourself, not to turn it into a total personal narration, but your driving force, what you really want to be good at or better at. That could be baseball. That could be just about any other endeavor. And you used these principles to discuss in your essay how you apply them to what you want to do better, to that goal, and use yourself sort of as an experimental lab animal if you want. Do an experiment on yourself. Document how you've used what you've learned, and I hope how it helps you do what you're doing better. Because let's face it, we are deterred by distractions, and I think that's happening. Oh, dare I say, I think it's happening to a few of you as we speak, who are not quite getting to the point of completing the work. I hate to see you fail. I don't want to see you fail. It hurts me. So let's get with it. All right. So in this instance, you take several principles and elaborate upon them from the book, including this one about consciousness. I'm sure that you could adapt that, and develop your essay based on your experience in applying that principle. Now, that's going to take over a period of weeks, but remember, this isn't going to be due until the last couple of weeks in the semester. Okay? And you will have an overview of major assignments due the rest of the semester so that you don't go into some sort of panic. But this can be chronicling what you're doing and how you're doing it, and how you're using those principles. Not necessarily just make yourself happy, but how you're doing that. What if you took the opposite point of view and you made the case for sadness? Now, there's reference to that in here. There's a wonderful book by Thomas More that came out years ago called The Care of the Soul. One full chapter in that book is devoted to the need to accept and embrace our sadness, melancholy. Sometimes it's thought to be sweet, that it is enjoyable. Depression, not clinical depression, right? But he goes into great detail more about the gardens that were popular during the Renaissance, and they were actually set aside for those times when we felt down, and you went to the garden and you actually threw yourself in to the beauty of the melancholy. Isn't that interesting? So, you know, happiness can be terribly superficial, right? Sadness. In our culture, we try to mask it with all sorts of medications, and that's part of the point here, and that's part of the point in Moore's book too. That really is just maybe the possibility that you can make the case we can't have happiness without sadness, right? So we're trying to get beyond the obvious here. Write a critique of the book if you want. Now that's not, oh, I found it boring. That just shows you have short attention span. That's not a critique. But there are critiques written about it, legitimate criticisms and analysis that you can tap into, and you have your point of view. Just don't say, I believe, I feel, I think. You don't need that. Cut it out. Just get to the point, just as we did with our last essay. And make your case. Make it with reasons. Make it with evidence. That's what we're talking about. Rational thinking, right? So that's a possibility. You have to know the book. You have to look up, you know, other critiques, but you can certainly do that. You can take any major premise, any major idea in the book, and expand and develop it to your choosing. Wow. You know, there's so much mythology in the book. Well, it happens to be an interest of mine. You probably already guessed that. But this whole business of concentration and self-discipline and that laser-like focus. I remember the Buddha under the Bodhi tree. Same three temptations that faced Christ and then, frankly, face you. We may not be holy spiritual figures, but we face them. What are they? Fear. Fear. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to do what I want to do well. You know, nerves, in effect. Seduction. Lured away. It doesn't have to be sexual. Lured away from the focus by that, well, letting some other part of us do all the talking for us, right? What's the other one? Power. I want power. I want authority. I want status. I want to drive the Lexus, and I want to think that I have a lot of people who are obligated to me. And look at me. Who am I? Oh, yes. I'm so-and-so. I got status. You know, those three temptations. So, I mean, you can just run with some of that. You realize that. Okay, let's talk about intros briefly. And there are so many more ideas that pertain to this. I just want to give you a few to kind of get you, nudge you in the right direction. Let's talk about intros. Classic intro, if you're going to argue for, let's just take, for example, a case for sadness. Let's say you have 4 or 5 major sections to your paper. Well, in effect, you don't list them like a grocery list, but you do allude to them in your intro. It's a foreshadowing intro. So sadness should be embraced because we need appreciation of sadness to have compassion, which means literally broken down, suffering with. And that's one of your sentences in your intro. We also need to embrace sadness because without it, we probably don't truly appreciate those times of joy and celebration. Another sentence goes in your intro. You see where I'm going? Then it becomes a major section of your paper. So this is like a blueprint that you're doing for the rest of your paper. Maybe you have a really striking example that you put in your intro. And we're talking about, and I've actually spoken with students about this, and we're talking about the safe zones. You know, you lead into it with a documented case of a suicide that was based on bullying because you want to make the case that safe zones should have been adopted. There are all kinds of ways. You can give background, even necessary background in an introduction. Lots and lots of ways to do this, but that's a creative act. Many people write their paper before they write their intro. Get that, because you don't know what you're going to say, and then fine-tune the intro to justify how it fits with the paper, fine-tune the rest of the paper to justify how it fits with the intro. So that's the way that can work. I'm going to just make one more quick point here. I'm trying to get many of you, when I look at the entries that you've made on the form, and I realize this is a little more relaxed and informal, but I'm getting, you know, paragraphs just full of general comments. Happiness is friendship. Happiness is family. And then I get all these, you know, now, you got one generalization. You got one claim per paragraph. And you've got to defend it. You've got to support it. Remember, your audience doesn't believe you necessarily. Your audience is skeptical. Does not accept at face value what any of your claims. You can't just throw them in there and say, well, okay, that's just the way it is. You got to offer evidence, reasons, and great idea to look at the opposing points of view. That develops your argument. Okay, too much said. So I got to put on my cape and just fly on out of here. So, end of story.